the building, but makes it a little more difficult to get to our committees on time, so I appreciate everyone's patience. Committee, today we are going to have a presentation by Blake Flanders, President and CEO of the Kansas Board of Regents, just kind of on our higher ed by the numbers. In this committee, we do take on K-12, higher ed, the whole gamut. So we're going to get an overview, and if time allows, we will start working a couple of bills, starting with the two bills we heard yesterday. So that's the plan for today if we get there. And with that, we will turn it over to Blake Flanders. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Chair Erickson and members of the committee. I'll just today walk through some of our items here at the board, what the Board of Regents does, and really what we've seen in terms of the numbers and kind of what we see maybe in the future and how we might partner together for Kansas. Next slide. The board is a 9-member board, has 4-year terms. We have different relationships with different institutions. All of the public institutions come underneath the Board of Regents, but we govern the state universities. What that means is we actually hire the chancellor and presidents and evaluate those presidents and have a fiscal responsibility, governance responsibility. We coordinate the community colleges and technical colleges, and they have their own local boards. In the case of community colleges, it's a board of trustees that's elected because they have local taxing authority. And then we regulate the private out-of-state institutions to deliver in the state. Now, these are the for-profit institutions. The only institutions we do not have relationships with formally is the independent colleges. And you might have heard from Matt Lindsay before. Those colleges would be such as Bethany, McPherson, many of the church-founded independent colleges. We also administer all of the state's student financial aid programs. We administer the adult and GED programs. So if you want a high school equivalency diploma, we do that. And we're in charge of the defined contribution retirement plan for our governed institutions and those employees. Next slide. In terms of our functions, we also have performance agreements for each institution, and we've moved to items in those performance agreements that are more related to activity around developmental education and some of the things that we're doing that I believe at least are more cutting edge and research based. We approve programs for institutions for state funding, and we also, one important thing is we develop a unified budget ask for all the institutions, and we represent all the institutions to the state legislature by statute. We have 3 priorities that we're really highlighting this year. We have a number of priorities because our role is to show you the needs at the institutions. But the 3 highest priorities, which isn't for this presentation really, but is salaries where our state employees at the universities and at the Board of Regents were left behind in terms of salary increases. That didn't come from this body, but at the end of conference, we've had a shortage of about 5% over 2 years. So we don't want to lose good people. We also are strongly recommending to fully fund the formulas for our 2-year colleges, and then make some additions to the cybersecurity, where our institutions and really all entities are under threat on a daily basis. Next slide. So in terms of enrollment, next slide, we're slightly up in terms of degrees and certificates. Actually just slightly down in terms of baccalaureate degrees, but if you look at the collective, we're slightly up over a 5-year period, but really relatively flat there because we have seen some softening enrollments. Next slide. We do have some good news from this year, year over year. Our institutions have had increased enrollment. Washburn University's up over 8%. The University of Kansas has record enrollment. at over 23,000 FTE for the fall. And by FTE, I mean full-time equivalent student. It's one way to determine the number of students. Community colleges are up over 4.5%, and technical colleges up over 7.5%. So it's been good news year over year. Next slide. However, I bring you good news, and I also bring you not so good news. Our enrollment trends are not uniform across the system, and we've seen really flat enrollments at the universities to slightly softer. We've seen some sharper declines at our community colleges. Some of that probably due to just location and population trends in Kansas. And then our technical colleges, however, have really seen an increase in enrollment. Part of that, and I'll talk about that later, is we've had technical colleges begin to affiliate with universities. So we have Wichita Area Technical College affiliated with Wichita State University, became WSU Tech. Washburn, it was Kaw Area Technical School at the time, affiliated with Washburn University and became Washburn Tech, affiliated with Washburn University. And then just recently, we've had North Central Kansas Technical College and Northwest Technical College both affiliate with Fort Hays State University. Now, we don't know a lot about that affiliation, that just happened, but the two affiliations I can tell you from WSU Tech and Washburn Tech is it's been great for those technical colleges. Candidly, WSU Tech's been a juggernaut since that affiliation, and I think the same could be said for Washburn Tech as well. Next slide. So just in terms of what's happening with enrollment and what we've seen, and you've probably, some of you have heard me present this before, we've seen a declining college going rate. I think there's a couple of reasons for that. But recently, we also have a looming enrollment cliff, and that's based on decreased birth rates. There's just going to be fewer K-12 students. Next slide. We have we just got in the updated numbers for this year, but we've seen the enrollment drops about 11% over the last 10 years to our public colleges. The most recent enrollment is out-of-state enrollment. Wasn't 11%, it was actually 10.2%, so it kind of arrived at the same rate that it was 10 years ago. That seems to remain relatively steady. The independent colleges were up. They've since softened to about 3.7%. Some of that bump may have been due to some eligibility differences that community colleges had. They used to have to be required to take a number of in-state athletes. They're no longer required to do that at those programs. So some of those athletes that still wanted to compete may not have went to the community college and may have went to independent colleges. So you might see a little bump there. But really what our biggest area of concern is that we've had a softening of college going rate. And one issue for us is we have more first-generation students, higher populations of students that we haven't served very well in the past, candidly. We've got some issues with academic preparedness of high school graduates, and there is also a public perception on the value of higher education, and maybe that it's not the value that's needed in order to really get a good job. Next slide, please. This chart kind of shows you what the projected graduate trends are here in Kansas. We're going to be impacted by this enrollment cliff. And then we're also going to see a change in the population of students. So Hispanic students are going to increase to, are going to be up about 2,600 students, white students down almost 2,000 students. So not only are the classes going, so these enrollment trends, this trend of 11 percentage points dropping over 10 years happened when the classes in high school were the same size, sometimes even slightly larger. So now we're entering into a time when the classes are also going to get smaller, and they're going to become more diverse and have more first-generation students in. When I say first generation, what I mean is their parents did not graduate from college and probably likely did not attend. At no point during the next century does the Census Bureau project high school graduations will again exceed 4 million. So this is going to be, and that's a national number, so this is going to be a longer-term trend. In Kansas, it might affect some of our counties differently. I expect urban counties might have a little more steadiness than rural counties, but this is certainly an issue. And so you might ask, what could we do about it? So one thing you might think about is the footprint of higher ed going to be the same? Does it need to be the same 30, 40 years from now, even 10 years from now as it is today? One thing, one issue is with affiliations, is if I'm an institution and I want to affiliate, my local board has to vote for that, and then I have to wait another year because I need to take that through the Kansas legislature. So one thing you might say is, let's have legislation that just says, we aren't forcing any affiliations. I don't think you can. I mean, I don't think that's a good practice, really. But you have the permission to affiliate. We also, at the board, we can't combine any universities as well. That's in statute that only the Kansas legislature can do that. You might take a look at that and say, you know, you can be permissive. You don't have to take that to our body as well. You may choose not to give up that authority. But if we want to make it easier for institutions to begin to do that, these are just barriers currently that are out there. Next slide. So what are we doing on our university campuses? We're strategically demoing some of our facilities. We're making our footprint smaller. We're going to continue to really fight to keep our enrollments. We've got several strategies to do that, but we know that our facility footprint is likely too large, and some of those facilities are out of date. And so we can save deferred maintenance by tearing some facilities down. You've allowed that through facilities renewal and have helped fund that activity, and I say thank you for that. Next slide. So what do we see in terms of the talent level and talent development pipeline for our Kansas businesses? Next slide. We did a study, and here's what's wrong with these data, I'll just tell you, is you do a couple of studies. I've got national data, I've got some in-state data, and the hardest part is nobody believes them. It's always amazing to me that the numbers are there, they're just hard to believe. I'm going to show you some numbers on a couple of things, and you'll find it hard to believe. We had Dr. Donna Ginther from the University of Kansas do a study for Kansas, and she said, you know, on these new jobs, we're going to add 54,000 new jobs in the next 10 years. She said, you know, I might be wrong there. It might be 45,000, and it might be 65,000. You can't hit it exactly. But of those new jobs, over 90% are going to require a baccalaureate degree. Now, this isn't replacement jobs, okay? So we got 180,000 jobs that require a post-secondary credential. They're going to be replaced. And when I say a post-secondary credential, that might be welding. It might be a one-year licensed practical nurse. It might be a 2-year registered nurse. Could be a baccalaureate level nurse. It may not necessarily be a baccalaureate degree, but of the new jobs, 90% are going to require a baccalaureate degree. Now, there's quite a bit of controversy on HR departments always putting baccalaureate required. You may have heard that, and I think federally they've talked about that. Having said that, the requirement's still there. And so So that's what the market right now is telling us. Next slide. And if you look at the national data, I hear this all the time because I have one too. Everyone says, well, I have an uncle, he went to 6th grade education and he's a multimillionaire. Okay? And I always say, well, that's one. So if you look at this slide and you look at that bachelor's degree median lifetime earnings, okay, and just go across there, you can see that if you have less than high school, you have a chance of earning more than someone with a baccalaureate degree. But it's 7.3% chance. Okay? So it's not great. If you've got a high school diploma and you choose not to go on, you may earn more than the average person with a baccalaureate degree, but it's only a 14% chance. Okay? So you can just go across there. Some college no degree. If you got an associate, you got a 28% chance. Likely, those associate degrees that are earning more are probably in nursing. Okay, or they may be in advanced manufacturing or some of the higher end trades. But you know, it's 28%, and so you can just go through and see kind of exactly what the market is demanding on that. Next slide. If you look at right now, how many of our graduates live and work in Kansas? If you look after 10 years, Washburn, the community colleges, and when I say municipal universities, I'm talking about Washburn University, the community colleges and the state universities, they're all about the same, right around the 50 to 51% mark. The tech colleges are about 10 points higher because typically people who are interested in the trades settle locally. So that's certainly an advantage. Next slide. Why do people move out of state? Well, if you go through an education program at a university, you typically do not go out of state. So you're getting prepared for teaching in Kansas. And we just had Dr. Ganther pull the salaries and just look at neighboring states. I don't want to leave here and everybody says, well, Blake said that teachers are making a lot of money. That's not the case. We're just comparing them to the other states in the region. And if you look at that, we do pretty well with middle school teachers. We're kind of in the middle on high school teachers and a little above the middle in terms of elementary school teachers. So there's been some adjustments probably with school districts, and so we need to thank your support and those school districts for helping teachers out. Not saying that it's adequate, but we're staying on pace with the neighboring states. Next slide. But if you look at the other occupations, this is where there's a real demand pull outside of our state. You know, we're at the bottom in terms of engineering compensation. Registered nurses, kind of in the middle to lower, and in businesses, we're near the bottom as well. And so I'm a fresh college graduate. We actually pulled our engineers because we wanted more engineers to stay in the state. We said, why are you moving? So here's another myth, at least with engineering students, is, well, they're just going to fun places to live with a lot of amenities. They weren't. They were going to places with higher wage jobs. That was their number one priority, is I'm going to make $15,000 more. I'm going to make $10,000 more than I was offered. So that demand and that compensation matters to young college graduates. Next slide. So we have some educational program partnerships that support Kansas business. We have the University Engineering Initiative that you have funded. We've increased our graduates from 875 with the 3 research universities, KU, K-State, Wichita State, and we're up to 1440 per year. The goal was 1365. The Kansas Nursing Initiative that includes our independent colleges, our community colleges, technical colleges, and universities. You had set a goal and said, we want to increase the slots, this was actually in '06, by 250. So we want 250 more slots. We actually have 470 more graduates per year. So not just slots, but more graduates. And then the Excel in Career and Technical Education, we used to serve about 3,500 students a year that were high school students taking career tech ed. We're over 16,000 now. Our completions are a little down, so we need to look at how do we get more students to complete as opposed to sample. But those first two initiatives, I would tell you why I think they're successful. And it was because they have a high degree of accountability and a high degree of accountability for each local institution. So if you look at the engineering initiative, K-State's got a number they need to meet, KU's got a number they need to meet, Wichita State's got a number they need to meet. And so that accountability is local, and I believe that it matters. Next slide. By the way, on nursing, our NCLEX rates, pass rates are higher than the national average, so the colleges are doing a good job. In terms of the pipeline, I see a couple of threats to the pipeline. We've got decreased college readiness, and we also have a literacy initiative, and I want to talk just briefly about that. I know you've already heard about it, but I just want to say a couple of things. Next slide. So if you look at college readiness, there's just no question that it's declining. What's our strategy then? We're going to have fewer students who are going to be ready for college. So we've revamped our developmental ed. We've got community and technical colleges already doing co-requisite remediation. We know we have higher success rates doing that delivery method. But if you look, we used to have about 31% that met all four of those indicators for ACT, English, math, reading, and science. About 30, so really it was kind of aligned with what the economy needed. Back when the economy needed about 30 to 33% of the economy was baccalaureate level occupations. That census changed. But now we're at 18%. And no one believes that number. So that's another issue, is that 18% meet all four criteria and that take the ACT. Now, we do have more students taking the ACT than before, so you expect those numbers to soften somewhat, but they went from 31% to 18%. Next slide. We've also got the latest scores from NAEP. And NAEP's not perfect in terms of the reading scores. And you can see that we have in that gray, which is below NAEP basics, and our state assessments tell a similar story. We got 41% of the kids that are below basic in reading. Now, there's plenty of blame to go around. We produce the teachers, right, for all the schools. And so that's why we have a literacy initiative. Now, it's hit some headwinds in the House. It's no longer funded in the House. But I would tell you, somebody's got to do something about literacy. And what I would call for is we need more accountability. We need local accountability. We need accountability for us as well. So we need more coaching out there. I don't believe it's a teacher problem. I think we need to give teachers the resources so they can align their practices with the science of reading. Because we know that works. Structured literacy works. Because here's the deal on this. If you're in the third grade and you don't read well, we might have an individual or two. Again, it's like, the uncle that didn't go to college that made a lot of money, but you might have an individual or two, but overall, you never catch up. So you start getting assigned to remedial classes and you just never catch up on average, okay? And so I see this literacy rate as one of the biggest economic threats for Kansas and personal threats to an individual's earning power. Because if you can't read, you don't do well in any subject across. You don't do well in math, you don't do well in history, you don't do well in psychology because you just can't read. So I'll go ahead and leave that. Next slide. So the demographics of Kansas are evolving, and here's what we're poised to do. We're going to need to recruit more first-generation students. We cannot rely on just students whose parents went to college. We're going to need to recruit more students who are eligible for Pell or come from families with need. Our population needs to get more racially diverse, and we need more students from the rural areas of our state as well. And now I want to tell you how I want to share some good news with you. Next slide. Next slide, please. One more. We have a strategic plan for Kansas, and it's a little different than many strategic plans. It includes a couple of things. We want to serve Kansas families. We want to serve Kansas business. We want to advance prosperity. But what we've also included within that is not just the numbers of where we want to go, but also what I call those leading indicators or some promising practices that we can do right now. Next slide. Underneath these three pillars, we're looking at affordability, access, and success for family. We look at the talent pipeline for business. And then on economic prosperity, we really look at community and state benefits and what intentional economic activity. So I would tell you just with that one, Wichita State has done a great job where they intentionally bring companies to their campus. They have an innovation campus, and that recruits companies to Kansas, and they provide talent to those companies. Chancellor Girard was fully involved from the University of Kansas, was fully involved with the recruitment of Panasonic. And what can we do to partner? So companies are looking for talent, and they'll look to our universities and colleges to provide that talent. Next slide. We can go ahead on with the next slide. I want to share some progress and things we did. So in partnership with you, we advocated for need-based aid. You've increased that for students. We've had limited, the board sets tuition for the university. We've had limited tuition increases. We wanted to do student success playbooks at all of our universities, try to increase graduation rates. And then we need to make the system more seamless. So we have the same general education core now at universities as we do community colleges. We're one of the few states that did that without legislation. So we've done that, and we have some system-wide transfer degrees. Next slide. So what happened? You quadrupled state financial aid. We're still not at the average of the surrounding states. For years, Kansas didn't need that much state financial aid because we were a very low tuition state. Over time, higher ed became the great balancer of the state budget, didn't receive as much funding. Tuition increased. We didn't go ahead and keep up with need-based aid. But recently, the legislature has done that. I think it's paid off. Our board has increased tuition and fees at less than half of the growth of CPI. And student loan debt of our graduates who are Pell recipients has decreased 14%. So we see some things coming together there. In terms of debt for our graduates, the story nationally, you see this story all the time. I graduated from college. I have $200,000 in debt. I'm working at a hamburger stand. I can't pay it back, okay? That story is not as true for Kansas. Here, our median debt, some students don't have debt, about 29% don't have any debt when they graduate. Our median debt's about $20,500. And for the private colleges, only about $24,000. The independents, I should say. So community colleges, $8,500, tech colleges, $9,500. So we have a reasonable debt load for graduates here in Kansas, generally. But it's still something we continue to look at. Next slide. We're providing courses, 15.5% more high school students than 5 years ago. We believe that's a great strategy because they still have the custodial aspect of high school, so many first-generation students might take those classes for the first time. And the number of our Pell-eligible students in the system grew 4%. So that's a hard number to move. So we are starting to make progress with those students who come from families with need. Next slide. One that we're really proud of is our on-time graduation rates increased 9.7%. And we believe that's part of those student playbooks where we brought in Georgia State University, who had tremendous success, the National Institute of Student Success, and we looked at all of our practices and developed the best practices at each institution, and we've seen that come together. We've got increased retention rates, and starting wages for graduates are up 16% the last 3 years. I'd like to take credit for that. That's probably due to a pretty tight labor market in the economy. But if our number's good, we're still going to list it for you so that you can see that. Next slide. We've developed system-wide transfer programs in area of high need. As an example, if you want to go into elementary education, you can go to any community college, transfer all your credits to any of our state universities, and you get them to transfer. And so those are pathways of high need. We've done business administration, computer science, nursing, social work, and just begin to work through those programs to ensure that we can have a seamless system. We've created front doors at each of our state universities for businesses so that they know exactly where to go if they really want to partner with business or with the university, and certainly research and innovation is a big deal for Kansas companies. Why is the aircraft industry continuing to be strong in Wichita? I believe it's because of the National Institute of Aviation Research. So that innovation really helps our companies. Next slide. We've got more students staying in Kansas. Our total research funding's increased 53%, and the industry part 162%. Next slide. Go ahead on the next slide. We're taking an active role in economic development, and each college and university is working in that space. And I just looked up, if you're a college graduate, you're healthier. You live 9 years longer than someone without a college degree. So by definition, those individuals that complete college are typically healthier. The next slide is something I want to really leave us with. If you go to the next slide, please. As we develop things like the Partnership Biomed Center in Wichita and the Cancer Center, and as we recruit companies to our local areas, and maybe the company has a third of the jobs that do not require a college degree, but are higher wage and more competitive than is currently in that space, okay? I always say, whether or not someone in Kansas directly interacts with our system or not, we're working to have a positive impact on their careers, their health, and the economic outlook for their family. So no matter where you are in Kansas, no matter what your level of education attainment is, something like the Cancer Center at the University of Kansas can benefit you. We hope you never need it, but certainly that research can benefit you. With that, next slide, we have all kinds of data. One of our central duties is to collect all the data from the universities and colleges, and so if you ever need anything, you can go to our website. We've got a robust portal there, or the easy button is you just call me, and I'll send you the report. So I'd stand for any questions.
Thank you for that thorough report. I hope it was very helpful and always good to get an update. Committee, what questions do we have? Senator Gossage.
Thank you so much for being here. You're absolutely right. I taught third grade, and that's where we really realized how much my son was failing, that he couldn't read going into fourth grade. Then I homeschooled him. But for the teachers that reach out to us and say, you need to raise teacher salary, I always say back to them, we don't decide your salary, your school district does. So when you were showing us the graphic about, according to other states, we're kind of in the middle, et cetera, is there anything going out to teachers from the school district, from wherever, to let them know the state does not determine their salaries?
Yeah, I don't know. Our faculty know that you actually do have an impact on their salaries, but I don't know if Commissioner Watson is doing that or not, so that wouldn't be a role that I would have, because that would be with K-12.
So this teacher salaries you're referring to college salary?
No, I'm referring to
You were
K-12 teachers.
referring to K through 12.
All I was showing is our graduates.
Your
We
graduates.
graduate a number of teachers, and if you compare teacher salaries in middle school and in elementary, we look pretty good compared to surrounding states. In the high school, we're just kind of in the middle.
So we're looking at it in comparison to salaries for graduates as opposed to that.
Correct.
Could you, as you were talking about, the teachers in higher ed know that we have an effect. Can you tell us, because we're not setting their salaries?
Yeah, so what you do, though, is they are state employees. And so here's what happened. For years and years and years, if you approved, if the governor and the legislature approved a raise for state employees, everyone got that raise. And graciously, you would give that to us in what we call a merit pool. So that if you said it's a 2.5% or 5% raise, we might actually have a decision maker say, well, you get 7% because you're performing higher, and maybe you get 3% if you're not performing as high, okay? And so the legislature and governor had been very good about that. We also have to match about half of that salary total because we're not all funded through state general fund, okay? This was the same for years. 2 years ago, state employees got a 5% raise, and state university employees and my agency, Board of Regents, only got a 2.5%. It happened again the next year. So what we're doing is coming back saying, hey, at least, and it didn't come from this body, but at least correct that you shorted us 2.5 2 years ago and another 2.5 last year. We'd just like to get up to even. There was also a market study, as you might know, done for state employees that were outside the university. They asked us to do that market study. We've given that to the special committee as well.
So just to clarify, in that ruling or in that law that said 5% increase, did it specifically say, but exempt teachers in the higher ed universities?
Not just teachers, it said every employee.
Within
So that could be someone that's landscaping, that could be someone working in facilities. It gave us half.
And then as
So that happened twice,
so
actually.
as state employees, though, is it also within your budget that you could decide to give more if you chose to do that out of your budget?
You could, you would not be getting state support for that.
Thank you.
So, yeah, that's true.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Petty.
Thank you. A couple of things. You provided for us slide 16 and 17 that show the teacher salaries and then also occupational salaries and how
Right.
those compare. For me, that just reinforces, even though you're showing our neighboring states for teachers, we're talking about, college education, and it continues to show that the teaching profession is underfunded.
I hope I don't leave here with everybody saying, well, Blake says the teachers are doing really well. This is just comparing to other states. So it may be that every state's incredibly low and we just happen to be the highest, maybe on middle school teachers some way. It also can mean, because that's just an average of what there could be, that maybe some of our teachers are more senior in their career. And then as they drop off, as you know, you're going to probably get someone on the lower side of the salary schedule. And so there's a lot of nuance to those data, but that's what they are.
Right. I'm just saying, when you look at other occupations, we still I'm just going to say as a state, we don't value educators as much as we do nurses. Let's just put it that way when it comes to salaries. I mean, this chart shows that if I'm a nurse, I can, I'm starting at, or an average 66,000, whereas as opposed to an educator, it's in the 50s. So it doesn't, whatever level you're teaching at, so it doesn't matter. Concerning the structured literacy.
Okay.
I know you mentioned about right now what's happening in the House when it comes to the funding. Could you just remind us what was in the budget request for structured literacy?
Yeah, so the board actually wouldn't have had it in their budget request because you passed a statute that was already in the budget for 10 million. So we only asked for the increase side. So in the House right now, and that could all change, we got a long ways to go, but that has been removed. I would tell you that, and I'll just say that's a concern for me.
So when you say that's been removed, you're saying the 10 million's been removed?
Correct.
So the 10 million has been removed, even though we passed legislation that said that we would fund?
So even though funding is designated might be recurring, we know that every year the legislature decides, and governor decides funding. So it's a yearly, we've had these conversations, it's a yearly thing. So you get to decide each year, do you want to keep doing this or not?
But we
Senator, we have 3 more people we're going to try to get to. If we have time, we will certainly come back. Senator Argabright.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Blake, do I remember right? Are you from Northwest Kansas?
Yeah, we hated the Atwood Buffaloes.
Why did you have to lead into that?
I'm originally from Goodland.
Well, I appreciate your service to all of Kansas, regardless of that comment.
No, I'm kidding you.
Hey, I thought you did a very nice job, very comprehensive of a lot of areas. I appreciate you speaking to literacy. And your last slide was an array of how you pull data. So my question, and it deals with both public and private, do you have a way to pull how our early childhood kids are doing, how those third graders not scoring well, how they actually do, because you're kind of the end product. Mm-hmm. And to me, that makes sense, especially how you presented all that very well. Do you have a way to pull that data that actually, I'm going to say track, I hate to use that word, but tracks a child through, even the ones that are struggling, what the end product looks like?
Yeah, I could get to the end product. I've got to talk to the commissioner to see if we can see where they are along the way, because we don't have access to the K-12 data. Okay. So we get it in the aggregate, but I really believe if we want to increase support for teachers, it's really hard to do that when you don't know who's struggling. And I know it would be a bit controversial to say, well, let's track it to the individual teacher. But I think that would be a positive thing, not as a stick, but as a way to get people resources that are struggling.
Madam Chair.
Quickly, Senator, we've got 2 more.
I'm more interested in the child and how the success we're doing of children, through the process, whether they're post-secondary or not. But you're one of the end products, and I've just found it curious as you talk, and I appreciate all that, I really do. How are we actually doing at the kid level? Yeah. Is my
You know what?
question.
I'll dig into that and meet with you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Senator Rose.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Flanders. My first question is about the chart with the ACT and those 4 topics, and you said that 31% has gone down to 18%. And you said that in the past, when it was 31%, that was okay because the economic demand was about 32%. So what is today's economic demand for college graduates? Is it still 32%? Then my second question along those lines is, can you give us a number of students, instead of just percentage, 31% going to 18%, how many people is that?
Yeah, so if you looked at, if we just said one class was taking it, and I know there's some juniors take it, and so high school administrators could correct me here, there's about maybe 34,500 seniors in high school, and so then you could see that percentage. Now, they might be prepared in 2 areas, might be prepared in 3 areas, but these are the ones that passed in 4 areas. And then the chart that I showed you of the new jobs coming to Kansas and that kind of, we've just seen an acceleration of baccalaureate level needed in the marketplace. And if you look at the wage separation, it's really been going on since the early 70s. And it's not as much maybe that baccalaureate individuals are earning so much more if you track it towards inflation, but those with only a high school diploma are earning quite a bit less. If that makes sense. If you track that to inflation costs.
So the question was, when we had 31%, the 4 categories on the ACT, and the economic demand was about the same. The question is, what is today's economic demand?
I'll get back to you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair.
And finally, Senator Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Blake, for being here. You said something near the beginning that caught my attention because I hadn't heard this. You said something about the increase in the private colleges had something to do with different rules on sports. Could you elaborate on that?
I don't know. I'm speculating. It may have. So at one time, I know that community colleges for some sports, not all of them, but for some sports required a certain number of Kansas students have scholarships in that sport. So let's just take football, for example. Maybe there was a certain percentage that had to be from Kansas. So as those get lifted then, and those individuals from high school still want to compete, they're going to say, well, and candidly, community college football is pretty competitive, and so I'm not going to be able to get a scholarship at a community college. I'll go to an independent instead. That may account for some of the bump, is all I'm suggesting.
Okay, because I felt like we probably would have heard about that. And then last question, if I may, Madam Chair. When you talk about the income, did you guys do any sort of study on cost of living to those states?
We did.
Salaries too? Okay.
They're actually equated for, it's actually, their cost of living is not incredibly high, but we did that, yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. I hope, committee, you have found this interesting. Couple of housekeeping items. Tomorrow, thank you so much. Tomorrow, we will be having a hearing on SB 87 and SB 49, and we are meeting Friday to have a hearing on SB 48 and SB 78. Is there any other business before the committee? Yes. Yes. Okay, seeing no other business before this committee, we are adjourned. Thank you.